Welcome to the historic Texas Theater. My name is Mark Walters with BigFanboy.com, and we are here for another episode of what has been affectionately dubbed Nerd Fight, where we discuss Star Wars. Oh, why? Thank you, Barack. Thank you for putting it all the way over there, so I have to walk over there to get it. All right. Where we discuss all things Star Wars and kind of feelings that are going on. And man, oh man, is there a lot to talk about with this one. So I guess I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get our panel up here. I'll start off with Shannon Sutlief. Is that you right there? Okay, Shannon. Shannon with Dallas. I'm going to let Shannon introduce herself because I don't want to give her the wrong job title. So I want to make sure she introduces herself. So yeah, Shannon, the very lovely Shannon Sutlief. A pillar in the geek community. Wonderful to see you.
Good to see you too.
What is your official title?
My job title is events editor for Guide Live and the Dallas Morning News.
There you go.
But I'm a big geek and I involve in the Dallas Geeks Facebook event page, so we do that too.
Absolutely. Very, very cool. All right. Who else have I got over here? Devin, Pike, get on up here. Devin, of course, you may have seen his 36-hour marathon to fight cancer, which I was a part of, and Devin also writes for BigFanboy.com.
Hi. That's about the best.
This is familiar, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit, just a touch. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm liking it though. It's nice.
Very, very cool. All right, who else we got here? Justina Walford, come on up here.
Hey!
The very lovely Justina Walford. With Studio Movie Grill, as well as Texas Women, is it Texas Women Film, Texas Women in Film? Women Texas Film Festival, yes, the very wonderful Women Texas Film Festival. And who else? Is that Ashton? Yep. Ashton, come on up here. Ashton with the Texas Theater. Yes, if you have a glass, raise your glass to Ashton. And is Jazmine here?
Yep.
Where's Jazmine? Jazmine? Okay. And also, look, is James Wallace? Where's James? Yeah, okay, so we're missing two, but. All right, well, they'll be up here in a minute, so we'll go ahead and we'll get started here. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this, but then we're also going to kind of open it up for you guys to ask some questions as well. So be thinking about what you want to ask. There are no stupid questions. I'm sure some of you may prove me wrong, but you never know. Okay, so here comes James Wallace with the Alamo Drafthouse. He's on his way up here. James Wallace.
Clink, 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 clink.
Enter stage left.
Thanks, Snagglepuss.
Is that stage left or is this stage left? Because we're up here.
That's if you're looking at it, it's
All right.
stage left. That's how that works. And of course, James is going to enter from the other side because he's stupid.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yes.
And last but certainly not least, the very lovely Jazmine with Pretty Brown and Nerdy. Where's Jazmine? Jazmine, there she is. We have enough chairs? We good?
We have enough chairs. We kind of have enough mics.
Okay, is this everybody? Am I missing anybody?
And this, of course, is Mark Walters.
And I'm Mark Walters of BigFanboy.com. Thanks for coming out today, guys. We really appreciate you being here.
Oh, dinner. Great.
Well, let's put him on the grill. Come on, let's cook him
Give
up.
another poke on the bobby.
At our family gatherings, everybody tries to talk over each other, so we have a talking stick. I feel like this should be the talking point.
All right, sit down. It's not awake. Come on.
Pass it around here, we'll put it right here.
By the way, how disappointed were you guys that Chewie didn't take a bite out of that pork?
We don't know that he didn't.
That's true. That's true.
That could have been seconds.
Yes. Second breakfast.
There's
All right,
no such
so
thing as the expanded universe. Shut up.
obviously I think one of the reasons that we wanted to do this was because this movie in particular, perhaps more than any Star Wars movie, has created some pretty heated discussions, and some people have some pretty passionate opinions, either in terms of loving it or absolutely loathing it. So I guess let's kind of start off. Did it surprise you guys? I mean, let's start all the way at the end with James. Did it surprise you guys to see some of the comments that came out of this? I mean, was some of the hatred and some of the anger, did it kind of take you by surprise?
No, because no one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. No, I mean, anytime a filmmaker tries to come into a beloved property that people feel, it's like it's in our hearts. It feels like it's a personal part of all of us, and you try and change things up. And in my opinion, for good. But not everybody felt that way. I think you're gonna have people don't like change. The kind of joke that started going around was, oh, the prequels, they're not enough like Star Wars, we hate them, and oh, Force Awakens, it's too much like Star Wars, we hate it, and Last Jedi, I think, is trying to move into a new era and a new generation of Star Wars, and people, I think what has been interesting though, and I'm sure there's some people in the room that even had this experience, it's one of those movies that I think the first time you saw it, you probably went in expecting certain things and you didn't get those things, but upon your second watch or your third watch or how many ever watches, once you were just kind of open to the places it was going to take you, it seems to be one of those movies that, I mean, hey, we're up here, how many weeks has it been out now? And we're having a huge group conversation about it. So I can't remember the last time a Star Wars movie was discussed this much. So it's got to be doing some good. So.
Now, Jazmine, we just a couple days ago had this same kind of conversation with part of Devin's benefit, but I know that, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I know that you were a little bit disappointed. Talk a little bit about why you were disappointed with this film.
Yes, at first, upon first watch, I was a little disappointed about it, simply because I didn't get the emotional payoff that I was looking for with it, and there were a lot of aspects of it that I didn't like. Course, the whole Kylo and Rey, and then what happened with Snoke, and then the parent reveal just left me like, okay, what? Like, this is all y'all are gonna give me? Come on now. But after I watched it, I've seen it 4 times now. So after, that's it? Yeah.
Some of us don't
Force
own a theater,
Awakens
James.
8 times, so I think this is a little better than the last round. But I do feel better about the movie now, honestly. I don't dislike it as much as I did before, because I, took a step back and thought about a lot of, aspects of the film, and, kind of reevaluated it. And yeah, I like it now, but it didn't surprise me that a lot of people disliked the movie, simply because the reaction, from Force Awakens, a lot of people either loved it or hated it too. So I wasn't surprised to, hear that. But this is definitely the Star Wars movie that has caused the most conversation, the most, I've seen, even down to a petition to remove it from canon, which I'm just like, come on, y'all, really? Like, we don't need to do this. Let's be good about this now. But
yeah, we only spent $250 million to make this, but your petition is going to make us remove
exactly.
it.
It's just ridiculous, and some of the people with their Rey theories and Snoke theories are the main ones who are like, remove this from canon, but their theories were stupid to begin with, so, I mean.
Says it all right there.
Yes, exactly.
Ashton, what were your thoughts on the film when you saw it?
I hated it the first time I watched it. I had pretty high expectations. I wasn't the biggest Force Awakens fan, but I've always been a Star Wars apologist, so I felt that not liking Force Awakens, that I was not being fair to Star Wars or J.J. Abrams or anything like that. So I watched it again the next day and liked it more, but I'm very torn and divided, and I've had this conversation with Barack a few times, where I think at one point he called me like, oh, you're kind of like Kylo Ren, you're very, like, you don't know which way to go. And that's exactly how I feel. To kind of reiterate her point, is that my biggest issue is that I don't care about any of these characters except for Rey. Like, she's the only one that I really care about. Like, I have no emotional attachment to any of them, and I just don't, I don't like Finn, I don't like Rose, I just don't care about it.
You don't like Finn?
Yeah, I'll get into that. But no, that's the biggest issue. I actually don't have the same issues with it that I think a lot of the internet has.
Did you feel that way in Force Awakens too?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I didn't. I liked Poe, and I liked BB-8. He was cool, Like, I liked Poe, and I liked and Rey, but I did not like Kylo. I thought he was kind of just a whiny bitch. And then this one kind of just, it bothered me. And then when I watched it again, I realized, okay, well, there's some things that I just was not allowing myself to like about it, and it is really I appreciate what Johnson did with trying to make it not conventional or take away some of the conventions, I guess, the Star Wars conventions. But at the same time, I kind of felt like I wanted some of those things because I just want the Skywalker saga or whatever you want to call it to kind of go this certain way. And I don't know why you need to change that. Do that with your own trilogy that you're going to do next. If you want to change things, do it later. You don't have to change things now, but again, I'm still kind of divided. Like I like it and I don't like it. And there's a lot of things I don't like about it, but there's a few things that I appreciate, and there's some things that could just totally have been removed. Casino Island. What was it? What was the Casino Island called again?
Canto Bite.
Yeah, that gone. Like get rid of it. It's out.
Canto
Like,
Bites.
go away. And
Yes.
that, so.
Ready in time? James, did you not get that shirt ready in time either?
Canto Bites.
In production.
Okay.
Justina, what was your read on the film when you first saw it?
I loved it, and it says a lot because after Phantom Menace came out, much like people call themselves a recovering Catholic, I called myself a recovering Star Wars fan, and really hated the movies. And so when Force Awakens happened, I was like, oh, that was pretty good. Like it was good. I was like, oh, it's better than what I've been seeing. And then I saw this, and I'm like, this is it. This is like, I feel like when I was a kid again, and I think it's because I took a break. I took such a strong break. And now I'm back on YouTube with my sucky Snoke theory, and I'm this, like now I'm kind of like going like, oh my god, and then this Easter egg, and oh my god, and then this, and that's like so philosophically correct, and like, oh my gosh, and politically this totally means this, and like I'm geeking out again, and I think that's what made this movie cool.
All right, Devin, let's hear it.
Loved the flick, loved what Rian Johnson did with it, and I'm finally vindicated on a couple of things. When we sat here a couple of years ago, I said, I don't want Rey to be a Skywalker, a Kenobi, a kid of Darth Plagueis. I don't care. I want her to be the daughter of Joe and Jane Schmo. And when Rian Johnson gave that to me, I knew that this was not going to be the part of the expectations that we've had in Star Wars. Because the film, I mean, we've had 8 Star Wars films, 9 if you count Rogue One. We have a certain way that these films are set to be going in our heads. And to go in to episode 9, absolutely not knowing what we're going to see next is refreshing and fun. And that's the way filmmaking should be. Even though it's a new, with Force Awakens, it's a new Star Wars film with new characters, and we will grow to love them. And I didn't have the same problem with Finn or Poe Dameron. I think that they're almost blank slates at this point. We know what Poe's character is going to be. We don't know what Finn's is going to be, except for where he's finally committed to the rebellion or to the resistance at this point. But not knowing, that opens up so many narrative doors. And it's not just the spin-off trilogy, it's the main story, because it's not just about the Skywalker clan anymore. And that's more thrilling to me than anything else.
Bring it home, Shannon. What did you think?
I loved it. I was surprised, which I wasn't expecting to be surprised. I had an idea of where it was going to go because of how Force Awakens ended with her handing the lightsaber. And then I also had ideas because of... Okay. Oh, we're just... whatever. I also was worried because of Disney. I thought that, it's going to be about the Porgs, and we're going to have very definite storylines because of that. And I liked that it busted all of those worries that I had. Like suddenly, Rey was not who we were expecting her to be. Neither was Snoke. I felt surprised, and that's what I want from a Star Wars movie. Surprise.
I want to touch upon something that Ashton brought up a second ago, and that is which is something that bothered me about The Force Awakens as well, which was the kind of, petulant child that Kylo Ren was. But I think in a weird way, we kind of see a payoff to that, because we realize that he was being used by Snoke in this movie, and that, the fact that he was immature, was something that, Snoke was trying to take advantage of. I'm not sure if I liked the absolute end of that payoff. Like, I felt like the way they killed off Snoke was a little sudden.
Yeah, I
would
agree
have
with
liked
that.
to have seen Snoke at least carried through to the next movie. But I think maybe there's a reason for that. I think that now we're seeing some growth in his character to where, he, like at the end of the movie when he says, together let's take on the galaxy, and she says no, it's like, well, where does that leave him? Now he's just kind of stuck with the First Order. So I think, what do you think about that?
Yeah, and in second watching, that's what I took away the most that kind of changed my opinion, is I do like the way that Kylo ended up. I like Kylo when he's angry. I think he's great when he's angry, and when he's not, then it's that whiny, it's like I want him to be. I don't want him to be that way all the time, just to make me happy. I think for the story purposes, now that if he continues on this path where he's, you know, one of my favorite parts of this is like, you know, the aim all of your guns at that man. It's such a silly, you know, he could do so much more than that, but he's like aim all of them at that man, and he wants him to die so much, and he wants to end Luke and end the rebellion and his mom and everything like that, and I like the way he ended up, and I don't think I allowed myself to. I think I was so ticked off in first watching about all the other bad comedic things that were trying to happen or just whatever throughout the movie that I didn't like. That's what I took away the second time was, oh, okay, so I do kind of like where they're going with Kylo if they stick on that path. What kind of makes me worried is that you know, JJ's coming back with another director, so are they going to keep going on that path, or are we going to go back to Force Awakens? I mean, you don't know where we're going, which kind of like what Devin said, you know, that's great, but Johnson was so different than Abrams, so now are we going to go back, or my expectations are, I think, lower in a way.
James looks like he's itching to say something here.
Yeah, it's interesting because I personally think that Kylo is one of the most interesting dynamic characters that we've seen in any Star Wars film ever, because he's all those same reasons. He's emotional. He's conflicted. There's something there to connect with. He's not Darth Vader, this mysterious guy behind this mask. He's trying to be that, but he's not. He's human, and we've seen that conflict and that struggle within him. And I think you know, I think it would be really interesting if Kylo is the one that kind of brings balance in the end, and you know, I think it was such an amazing moment, not just because it was one of the coolest lightsaber battles in all of Star Wars history, but the emotion that informed that battle, and to see him make that decision to kill Snoke, and him and Rey fight together, and then him still be conflicted, and we saw that in Force Awakens with the choice he made there. He's so interesting. Like, I think he's just a fascinating character.
Devin, I know you want to say something.
Well, let's get Jazmine first.
Sure.
Yeah, to touch on that, honestly, and I think a lot of us see exactly what Luke saw in Kylo, because, like, Kylo just doesn't know how to harness his emotions and his anger, but when he does do it, he's brilliant. And I just think that's the main problem with him, is he doesn't have that balance, and maybe, you know, Rey will bring that balance to him, or he'll find it on his own. So,
What to put a cap on that? Do you think Luke's actions towards Kylo, do you think that ultimately pushed him into the bad direction? Like now he can't trust people anymore, or maybe especially the Jedi?
I think it definitely brought about trust issues with the Jedi in particular. Was it a good decision on Luke's part? Not necessarily, but Luke hasn't always made good decisions, and, you know, people say that Luke...
He never read the books.
People say that's, you know, people say like that lightsaber part is out of character for Luke, but if you really look back on it, Luke has always been conflicted with the light and the dark, and he still is. So for him to have a moment of weakness like that, that's not out of character in my honest opinion. That seems like something that could happen, and he realized that he made that mistake, but at that point it was too late.
Yeah, people seem to forget that Luke stopped in the middle of his Jedi training against Yoda's wishes and Obi-Wan's and their warnings, and never finished it. Like, to me, it was interesting to see that criticism of him, because I thought this Luke was very consistent in that he was just an older version of himself, but he's always been.
Well, just like any other dude, he just didn't read the instruction manual. But no, that's an extremely good point. But I don't think when we said that Luke was and is the last Jedi, and now that's it. There will be, I mean, in Episode 9, there will be no Sith, there will be no Jedi. There's no.
Not even a gray Jedi?
No, and shut up, that doesn't even need to happen, ever. Please let the expanded universe die. Guys, just put them on your bookshelves, leave it there. There will be no Darth Plagueis, any of this. Just please, just
Devin,
no.
have you ever heard the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
What?
I thought not.
You have to really know that scene to get that joke.
But the truth, it's bubble comedy. For the fans of the Oral Knots in the audience, there's a I think that character turn with Kylo is really important because he didn't stay a petulant child, because they really could have done so. And I'm sure that Hux thinks that he is still a petulant child because he's still wiping the keyboard off of his head. The bits with Kylo wind up being the most compelling character pieces in the film to me, because he makes the greatest transition forward. He's not just this child who's going to carve up a console, but more importantly, up until the point where Hux walks in, and he's certain that Hux is going to see this and kill him. He's just done with it. He was getting ready to get in an escape pod and run off, kind of like Finn, not really knowing exactly where he wanted to go. And then at that moment, he sees his power. He takes over the Supreme Chancellor position for all intents and purposes. And then what winds up happening is the same thing with Finn on the opposite side. Up until the bit where they're facing death, he's facing off against Phasma, Finn has never said he's a member of the Resistance. He's never fully committed to it. He lied about it to hang out with Rey. Why did he go back to Starkiller Base? To save Rey. Why did he go to Canto Bight for the Codebreaker? To make sure Rey didn't fly back into a disaster and die. Everything is based on that friendship, not because of what he has a belief in, whether it's the Resistance or whatever. He's just trying to save his skin until that exact moment where he looks back at Phasma and says, "Rebel scum." You can tell at that point he's sold on it, to the point where he's going to commit suicide in the mini Death Star, because you can't have a movie about Star Wars and not a Death Star weapon in it. So that's just that one thing. That both of those characters wind up committing. Rey was committed from the get-go, always. Poe was always committed to the Resistance. But Finn and Kylo both weren't committed. They were committed to their own pieces. Kylo was committed to being the next Darth Vader. Finn is committed to just saving his own skin.
And I just wanted to touch on that. That was something that I missed in terms of Finn. I had thought that he had made that commitment in Force Awakens, and so I didn't understand why his character was taking that step back from the progression that I thought he already had. But then after, that you're right, everything he was doing up until that point was for Rey, and it wasn't until, his fight with Phasma that he truly made that commitment. I honestly would like to see them do more with his character, because now that his arc is pretty much finished, with this film, I just want to see him, shine in Episode 9, and I hope they won't leave him hanging with that.
Justina?
Kylo. I think the best thing about Kylo, let's obsess on Kylo. Kylo.
Can he just be an honorary MCR member? Yeah. I just wanted to.
I think the best thing about Kylo is that I think actually his arc is that he thought he wanted to be Darth Vader, and now he's committing to actually destroying everything. Like, he is the ultimate nihilist now. Now he wants to kill everything. And that is the most fascinating character, because it's in a franchise completely committed to good versus evil. So we've now destroyed the concept of good versus evil. We've created this fascinating character who wants to actually destroy good and evil together. He doesn't want any of it to exist. And so that gives us this beautiful blank slate and this beautiful character to create a whole new universe. I think Finn and Poe are going to be interesting, because if Ben succeeds in destroying everything, what Finn just committed to something that's going to die, and Poe is nothing but what's going to die, and that's where it might get really interesting or really weird.
Yeah, can you imagine the regret that he would live with if he turns back to the Jedi, that he killed his father, that he's literally done all
Yeah, I
this
think
stuff,
there's no redemption for him at this point.
It's
No.
tough. Yeah.
Shannon, you want to bring it home?
Okay. Kind of at a loss. I really love Kylo, too. I'm glad to hear other people saying that, because I hated Adam Driver at the beginning. I was like, he's such a brat. I don't see his motivation other than just being a brat. And I liked him in this because he shows that vulnerability, and he seems to be constantly trying to figure out where he's headed, and now we don't know where he's headed. He's kind of like, okay, I guess I'll stay with these guys and go this direction. And so I'm curious to see where we're going to go in the next movie, and what his and Rey's relationship is going to continue, like if they're going to keep that connection, or if she's going to seal it off.
Okay, can we please talk about Leia? Not just because I love Carrie Fisher, but can we talk about, because we get to see some really great sides of Leia, and one of my absolute favorite moments in this movie is this, which she wrote herself, is the scene when she says, "Too many losses, I can't take anymore," and the exchange between her and Holdo towards the end of the film. So first of all, I want to see, do you guys feel like, because it is sad and tragic that we will not get more Carrie Fisher in the next movie. Well, maybe we will. I don't know. There's footage that's shot. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how they're going to wrap it up. But it's safe to say that we're not going to get as much Leia in the next movie as we did in this movie. But I felt like we got some really wonderful Leia moments in this film. How do you guys feel about the way, let's start with you, Shannon. How do you feel about the way that they handled Leia here?
I loved seeing that vulnerability to her and that she feels the losses so intensely. I think that helps make her a good leader. And I think she's trying to teach Poe that that's part of what he needs, is to have that connection with the people and not just a goal of winning a fight, but also the people who are in the fight and the people that they're protecting outside of the fight, like even if they didn't show up when the call came. I had feelings about the way that she came back to the ship. I saw it again, and I still feel a little weird about this.
That's called Carrie Poppins.
Yeah, very much.
No more Mike for you.
This is a movie with laser swords and an almighty force, and that's what brought you out of it.
Oh, I didn't. It's just
Okay.
It's just what it's called, Carrie Poppins.
Loved Carrie in it. Loved the moments that she was given, and it's really it's weird because you know that Force Awakens was Han's movie, Last Jedi was Luke's movie, and they were setting up Ep 9 to be Carrie's movie. And the fact that they're going to have to rethink that focus is really heartbreaking. Knowing what was possible, knowing where they were putting her character in position to do, where they're I'm screwing up my adverb tenses, I apologize. But I really, that's the thing I have the most trepidation about with Ep 9 coming in with Abrams worked with Carrie on Force Awakens, so he knows what he can turn to her for, and especially knowing what he could have done with her after Last Jedi, with the notes that she was giving Ryan. It's gonna be tough. It's really gonna be tough to see.
Yeah, I think we've unfortunately lost not only a great actress and a great character, we've lost a great writer in Carrie Fisher, and so a lot that she added to this movie, we've lost for the next one in so many ways. That scene, the first time I was too busy trying to keep up with the plot to really get emotional. The second time watching the movie just now, I was crying watching that scene because it's as if Fisher knew something, because it's just like exactly how it felt the last 2 years with a lot of our celebrities and stuff like that. So I feel like, first we're like, oh, Rian Johnson, like he's cleaning the slate, and then so did the universe. So we have no idea what's going to happen next because we really felt that setup happen.
Yeah, I did. I liked everything that Leia did in this movie, except I didn't like the space scene where she carried Poppins. It's pretty great. I didn't like that scene at all. I thought that was, I thought it was totally forced, and no pun intended. Yeah, and I love the Poe and Leia dynamic. I love that. When they communicate back and forth and argue and bicker, and she's playing like den mother with him. I think that's great. I loved everything about that. Did not like that space scene. I didn't even know why it was really even needed. Like even when I watched it again, I still kind of didn't feel like it was really. If you don't have that scene, do you lose anything? Besides, I guess her being asleep for a little bit and not.
Yeah, you put her on the bench. You can't.
But
just
I mean,
have her
you could have still had. I mean, you could have still found. I don't know. The way they did that, I thought was. Just didn't like that. I mean, floating back in like that, and everything.
I think if you hadn't had that scene, and especially now that Carrie has passed away, then people would have forever said, we never got to see her use the Force. I think that's why that scene is in the movie.
That's watching it the second time, that's an argument that I had that I can kind of see it again. It almost seemed like an easy out to when you're writing a character out of a script. If, okay, she's gone, and then she comes back. You're like, what the hell are they doing? But I really did like how how her character at the end of the film and how she kind of progressed through. And the scene with Luke I thought was great. Didn't love everything about it, but I thought there were some really good moments. And really, she was one of my favorite characters, or from favorite people in the whole movie, actually.
Jazmine.
Yeah, honestly, to touch on what you were saying about the space scene, I disliked it the way it was executed, but I understand why they had it, because for an audience that isn't familiar with the expanded universe or the novels or anything, they might not be aware that Leia is force sensitive. So I think that scene was mainly there for them, not so much people who are really, familiar with Star Wars. But could it have been executed differently? Yes. I call it her Supermaning back into the ship. It was really corny to me. I didn't like it, but other than that, I think to touch on what everyone else was saying, yeah, we're losing, the charm that Carrie brought to the Star Wars universe and her writing. She's an amazing writer. I agree as well. I do like her dynamic between her and Poe, and I think in episode 9, Poe is going to have to take a lot of what she taught him and utilize it, because he's pretty much in charge now. So he's going to have to take a lot of, what Leia taught him and make sure that he can be the leader that they need, because this is kind of, their most vulnerable moment. So we don't know what's going to happen with the Resistance, going forward. So.
I think corny is a really good way to describe that scene. It's like I didn't even think about that word, but yeah, it just seemed kind of lame, corny.
Well, isn't there that line in Return of the Jedi where Luke says, "You have that power too"? Yep. So,
Yeah.
So this was just kind of addressing that she does have.
Yeah,
that
and
power.
I mean, it definitely, what you don't think about is that she uses the Force in terms of Force connection and other things later in the movie. And we get that beautiful moment with that kind of look of realizing that Luke is becoming one with the Force. And so I think in a way it works to kind of set that up. But it's interesting because I haven't really heard anyone be critical of seeing her use the Force. I think everybody was pretty excited to finally see that and her have that moment. I think it was just visually the way it was executed. Somebody even made the comment that like if she had just been flipped around and like pushed herself, it wouldn't have looked as cheesy, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, it's I'm very torn with that moment because I do think visually it looks a little weird, but it's such a beautiful moment, and with that John Williams music cue as well, and you know, in retrospect, like losing her, it plays as a really kind of special moment. But yeah, I loved how much she was featured and her role in this. I do think it's interesting that they chose not to somehow write her out, because I have a huge, like, where do they go from now?
I think there's footage we still haven't
yeah,
seen.
there would almost have to be.
I don't agree. I think that it's going to have to happen off camera, and I know that it's going to be.
You just get it in the crawl. That's going to be
bad.
That's so bad.
It's not in the crawl. It's maybe her funeral scene is the first piece of episode 9.
Yeah,
you know,
maybe.
But
she needs a proper.
They had no warning for this. The film was basic. There were no reshoots when she passed.
Yeah.
It was, you know, there's nothing they could do to pick it up because they already filmed her death scene.
But the original cut was an hour longer.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
So there could be footage in that hour that wasn't used here.
Or could be porgs on parade. You don't know what was in that other hour.
All right, real quickly, and let's talk about this, and then I want to take some audience questions. Let's talk about Luke, and obviously there has been also some heated discussion about whether or not Luke was handled well. And James, if you want, we'll start with you, and then we'll go back around.
Yeah, I think it was handled. I think it was handled really well. I think, like I kind of already mentioned, if you go back and especially in Empire, I think there's a lot of consistencies with. You know, I put myself in the frame of mind of watching A New Hope and Empire and Jedi when I was a kid and identifying with that version of Luke, and now being older and being an adult and having kids and everything that goes along in life with being older, I identify so much with being one way when you're young and being a different person that is informed by the life decisions you made and the mistakes. And I think that, people have been critical of Luke going off and running away and giving up, but I thought, you consider the fact that Ben is family, and he intended to raise a new Jedi Order and probably handpicked all the other kids, and then made this decision, which he in the film admits was in a moment of weakness, that he's literally there with a saber about to kill his own nephew and realizes that it's a bad decision, but then it's too late because Ben sees that and sees that his own uncle has that moment of weakness, and so not only does he then push, it's this self-fulfilling prophecy that he has now pushed Ben Solo into becoming Kylo Ren. He feels like he got his students killed. He feels like that blood's on his hands, and then he feels like he helped essentially jumpstart the First Order and has brought upon, this kind of new, this new, war in the galaxy. All that stuff to me makes sense why his frame of reference, especially looking back at, I think it's interesting is I think people, if we grew up with Star Wars, we look at it in a certain way. But I think there's a lot of decisions in the original Star Wars made by characters, and even in the prequels, that weren't necessarily the right decisions or good decisions and weren't intended to be portrayed that way. But we look at the Jedi as they always make the right decisions. And I think it was so great to see Luke reach that, because that's something that a lot of people have debated for a long time, is that the Jedi, especially in the prequels, really made a lot of bad decisions that really brought upon, not necessarily good things. So I thought that was so well written and so well established of where Luke was, and I think the beautiful thing is that he feels that way in Last Jedi, but in the end still shows up. Like he still shows up to face down the First Order with a laser sword and stall and saves the day, and he's still the hero in the end, in a way, just different.
All right, Jazmine?
What was the question?
Luke Skywalker.
Sorry, I'm lost. What he said. No. I like the way that, at first I had problems with it, but now, having seen it multiple times now, I do actually like the way they chose to wrap up, Luke's, saga, pretty much. Yeah, like he was saying, a lot can change, from when you're young to when you're older. And I think at that point, Luke was just kind of done with everything. He's like, man, forget this. I'm out. I'm going to go on my deserted island and, farm and catch fish and drink, alien cow milk. Fuck you guys. But
Oh, Les.
that was the most awkward scene, by the way. I was just and I saw it the second time with my mom, and she was just like, why is this here? He's just like, oh, yeah. But,
Yeah, that's right. I just did that.
and what were they saying, that was a playoff to episode 4 when he was drinking the green milk? So, but I was like, the blue milk, but
Just the way Aunt Beru made it.
we don't need it.
It's just,
Except I
it's just
hope
a
not.
cow. It's
We
just a
don't
very
need it.
unattractive cow.
But
That's all it
and
is.
can I
The thing is the way that the cow looks at Ray.
right?
Kill me now.
And can I just give big ups to the caretakers on the island, because those caretakers were dealing with so much crap for Ray, and they have gossip because they probably talk at night about her.
And we didn't even see them react to the fact that Luke is gone. It's like, well, F, now what?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but and then people say, why would he do that? But we also have to look at Yoda. He did the same thing. He was just like, man, I'm out. I'm gonna go to this swamp planet and chill. Whatever. Obi-Wan, he's like, I'm just gonna stay over here and keep a close eye on Luke.
Force ghost or nah.
Yeah.
Luke felt like the fight was better without him,
Yeah. But it's just I think that was perfect on how they touched on that. Ray still brought something within him, because in the end, he did show up with a laser sword, just not in the way that we thought.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like Luke's arc in the story. I thought that it based on what you just said, kind of basically did what Yoda did. Screw it, I'm gonna go hang out over here. We kind of messed this up, so I'm just gonna go chill over here. And hang out with these caretakers who I thought were some of the best part of the film. Just their mannerisms were great. But yeah, I like how he ended. A lot of people hated how he passed on to the next plane or whatever you want to do with him. I was fine with that. That was really one of the on first viewing. That was one of the only things I liked about the film was Luke's character and Leia's character. Those are the only things I was really. All the characters, like I said at the beginning, from the original one, I was still cool with, but all the new ones is like I don't care about you, and which I already stated. So.
It's a challenge of a trilogy is that we walk away from the theater seeing the end of Act 2. And
Yeah.
like in a good movie,
Yeah.
you hate the movie at the end of Act 2. Because in
Totally.
a good movie, you're like, oh, okay, if this doesn't turn out the way I want, if that person dies because I really love them, then I'm gonna fucking hate this movie. And so that's where we are right now. We all just walked out of the theater going like, well, if this fucking happens, I'm gonna hate that movie. But if this happens, I'm gonna love the movie. And so you can't help but have that kind of controversy in the film. And what I think is showing that it's a good film is that I don't see a lot of people going like, well, I really hated Mother the first time, but when I saw it the fifth time, I was really into it. Like everyone's
I'm
like,
more
I
confused
hated
the
it,
more I
and
see
now I
Mother.
hate it the second time, and then
Yeah.
I hated it the third time, but the fourth time, I think it's okay. Like we give so much time, we give The Last Jedi so many chances before
Totally.
we hate it.
Yeah, yeah. I think Jedi is interesting because it's not an easy film to watch. It's a challenging film. It's definitely not necessarily. Of course, there are all those popcorn aspects that you get from a Star Wars movie, but to see so many people call like Star Wars a kids film or a film for kids, like this is by far the most challenging Star Wars I think we've seen, and some people just don't want to be challenged.
At
And
the same time, I know, Ashton, you want to get to this, but there was I was talking to Ted Price, the guy who runs the content over at Vocal, and he is our age, in his mid to late 40s.
I'm way younger
Grew
than
up
you.
with Star Wars. Yeah, I know. Shut up. I'm making a point here. And he takes his 7 and his 9-year-old, and they were the same age that we were when we saw the movie.
Yeah.
You were 3. I understand. It's fine. So
I wasn't
he says,
born.
so what did you guys think about it? And he's going through his head, that wasn't the way I thought it was going to go. I thought it was going to we're. I like the horses in the casino, Dad.
Of course.
That was it. So
Of course.
there's,
the one part that didn't belong.
but there's, I disagree with you, and we're going to hit that in a
Oh, we're not
second.
getting into
Oh,
this.
we're so into the levels that it works between the way kids see the movie and the way we adults
Yeah.
see the movie is, and that just shows how great a script it is because it
Yeah.
gives both, there's
Well-
hooks in there for every age group. And it's not just the cute things, it's also, it's the action, it's the way that it actually shows
Yeah.
what the costs of war are in a way that kids can understand.
That's what's beautiful about Star Wars is that our brains have unlocked more and more over time. I mean, you think back to what you used to connect with Star Wars when you're a kid, and you still connect with those things, and that's why we love Star Wars, because it reminds us of that time. But there's so many philosophical things and spiritual things that you can connect with that you just weren't at that level of maturity. So, yeah, at the end of the day, like, it's still a space fight fantasy film that gets us really excited in a childlike way. But this is by far one of the most complicated, layered. I think people are going to be dissecting this film for a long time. And yeah, you've been trying to talk for a long time. I'm sorry.
Kind of that my point got taken actually, but one of the things I think that if it wasn't for the prequels, we wouldn't be having some of the issues we have with this movie if it wasn't for those movies. Like, that's what kind of one of my arguments in favor of the movie, because some of the things that people say about it, the horsies, or whatever you want to call them, like my friend's kid calls them the horsies. I was like, it's not horsies, but whatever.
Space Forces.
Yeah, exactly.
Fire
Like,
ants.
that's like, pod racing or Jar Jar or whatever, which I think if now we have this expectation of Star Wars that needs to clean up all the crap from the prequels. And with the prequels weren't there, I don't feel like we'd be having a discussion about how bad this movie is. I feel like it would just be a progression, and if the prequels just never happened, you wouldn't be able to compare some of these bad moments to pod racing or Jar Jar or bad drama in
Dude,
Sith or something like that.
I'll stand by pod racing any day. That pod racing
I'm
sequence
saying,
is...
That's like the
no,
one
pod racing is
redeeming-
actually
the
like the
one
best
redeeming
part of it, but
All right.
I'm just saying in terms of like the kind
Darth
of the
Maul.
silly aspect of it, where it just kind of comes out of nowhere and it happens and it's this thing, and you didn't. I mean, you had.
Well, I think, too,
you had
it's-
it was there for a reason, yes. But my point is that let's just go with Jar Jar. Let's take out the pod racing, like the Jar Jar, the silliness of I guess his character and the Gungans or whatever. Like, it just all those things that we needed to make up for kind of jade people's opinions and ruin some opinions of how this movie really could
Yeah,
be.
but you talk to a whole nother generation, and their Star Wars films are the prequel films, and they watched them with complete childlike eyes where
that's
they
true.
can't see those things. They can only find
They
enjoyment.
were borderline cartoons, and the prequels
Yeah.
were like borderline cartoons,
Well-
and the original ones weren't, so they were never really kids' movies.
to-
but then they became kids'
Although I
movies.
have a friend who, his nephew, they saw Phantom Menace together, and he was, of course, despondent because he had like Star Wars tattoos, and he was like,
Yeah.
"Oh God, like this is horrible. I just introduced my nephew to
Yeah.
Star Wars with this shit." And then the kid just turned.
Yeah,
it
best
was
movie
like,
ever.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, George Lucas still has it, huh?
Yeah.
Like, but when you're a kid, you're,
I mean,
kids.
to quote another Lucasfilm property, I always think back to that line in Raiders of the Lost Ark when Block is talking about the pocket watch, and he says, "I can go buy a cheap pocket watch off the street, bury it in the ground. 100 years they find it, and it's rare and valuable." And I think we connect to these things that we saw at a time where we weren't watching them with a critical eye. And Star Wars is this holy trilogy that you can watch those with a critical eye. It's very hard to if you grew up with it, and I think a lot of people see them as perfect films. They weren't perfect films, and so I think that people think of the original trilogy, and then like you were saying, they compare Last Jedi, but I think there's so many things that The Last Jedi shares with the original trilogy, more so than Force Awakens, and Force Awakens, I think, gets that credit more because it's so surface level original trilogy.
I don't understand that, why people don't. Like, The Last Jedi, to me, does relate more to the original
Totally.
three, like, way more than Force Awakens does.
Yeah,
I've never
there's
really
more-
I
understood
bet
that argument
There's
at
more
all.
connective tissue.
Yeah,
I would put
absolutely.
money that George Lucas likes Last Jedi more than he likes Force Awakens.
Well, this was something we talked about a couple days ago. I said it feels like more of a true
Probably
sequel.
loves Canto Bite.
It feels like more of a true sequel than Force Awakens did. Because Force Awakens was more of a let's win the fans back. This was more of a let's follow up on some of these threads that you've
Yeah,
known.
and I'm
from the
not
original
critical of
trilogy.
Disney in any way for Force Awakens. I think it was the safe reintroduction
Right.
to Star Wars.
You had to have that movie
I'm-
to bring back the fans who hated
I'm
the
giving you the
prequels.
You had to make
I'm
up
giving
for
you
all
the
the
Ford
prequels, yeah.
finger.
Oh, no!
All right, let's go to the audience and take some questions. I know you guys have got. I see a hand right here, and then I'll go back here next. Let's start right here.
Okay, so in my mind, and I'm not sure this is on. In my mind, there's always been gray, and from the very beginning, it's been about separating the gray into black and white. So this I thought was really perfect in that terrified look on Luke's face when Rey finally taps in, and she immediately goes both up and down into the dark. And you can tell by his face that he's absolutely terrified, because I think that's what's been holding him back from the get-go, is that he was not willing to tap into the full power of the Force. And so I thought that that was really a beautiful way to bring him full circle, because he has, the whole time he's been taught through his whole lineage, that you need to stay on the light side and avoid the dark side. But you can't really get the whole enchilada without both sides, yin and yang. Any strong feelings about that?
I agree. I think you hit it. It's
Gray Jedi, right?
son of a.
Why do you hate that so much?
It's just my problem that people bring the perception of everything in the expanded universe that deals with the Gray Jedi into it, whether they realize it or not, and then Luke is going to be a Gray Jedi. No, he's not. Shut up. Just let Luke be Luke.
That was the great thing about wiping away the extended universe, so they could take and borrow what they wanted
Sure.
without being connected to all the other stuff that came along with it.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying don't be disappointed when he's not a Gray Jedi. He's not a Jedi of any kind. He's cut himself off from the Force. He's just a guy living on an island with a sea cow and some amazing fucking fish.
But I think I think this is more about the ambiguity of like her trying to figure out the path that she needs to take and not knowing, like, seeing the darkness as well as the light, and the fact that scares Luke. And I think that's a very good point, because he doesn't know what direction she's going to go. He's been down this road before. Needless to say, he's probably terrified, because here's someone that's even more powerful than the last guy that he screwed things up with.
And last time it happened, he wound up in a house on top of him.
Yeah. So I think that's more what this is about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
But I kind of wish on that note that we actually burned the books. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's kind of a cop-out that the books are still around.
Like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
like destroy it, destroy the books.
They'll probably forget about that in the next movie.
I actually think that the reason Yoda wants Luke to think they're gone is so he doesn't have any guilt about letting it all go on Octo. But Rey has them and can actually put them in the right context. And again, there are no Jedi, there is no Sith. I think I'm getting my tenses around on that. I probably don't. But just being able to say, okay, in context, this is what the older public did. This is why they screwed up, because they became a bunch of sanctimonious jerks in the end when the Empire did finally wipe them out. So now we can take elements for it and build a new foundation for the future.
I'm betting anything that the next movie ends with Rey starting up a new Jedi school with those books.
I hope not.
It could start with that. Yeah,
Maybe the kid with the brain.
I don't want it to be that way, honestly. I don't. But honestly, I think that the books are not only there for the possibility of that, but we also have to keep in mind that the saber that she has is broken, and it contains instructions on how to build a new saber. So I think it's mainly just there for her to just craft a new lightsaber.
Because again, women will read instruction manuals, guys won't.
Yeah, I mean, of course,
we gotta
the last scene, I don't understand why you're saying there's no more Jedi, because Luke literally tells us that he will not be the last Jedi. And the last scene implies
because he's been right every other time that he's made us think.
She was in Jedi training. The last scene implies that there are other Force sensitive. Right. Yeah. Of course. But. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Totally. Also, Disney's definitely going to create a new lightsaber, because that's it's going to be awesome to see a new iconic lightsaber, but two, there's another lightsaber toy they can sell that I will buy a lot of.
Okay, let's get a couple more real quick. Let's go right there. And am I missing anybody over here? Okay. All right, so we got there, and I think we'll be done.
I got thoughts about Luke or Leia. Which one do you guys want to talk about?
Whatever you feel more strongly about.
Well, since we were just talking about the books and Luke and things like that, I guess we'll go with that. I think an interesting thing that hasn't been brought up, and I don't see talked about when talking about Luke wouldn't do that, Luke wouldn't disappear, Luke wouldn't just run off, is he didn't. There's a million planets in the galaxy, right? Where did he end up? The spot of the first Jedi temple. He didn't run to disappear. There are a million more anonymous places he could have gone. He went looking for something. He has a map that shows where he went from temple to temple to temple to temple, right? He didn't go looking for anonymity. He went looking for an answer.
Yeah, but that place wasn't known, though, because the whole Force Awakens was about them trying to find him. They didn't know where he
Nobody knew it but the Jedis.
Right, but why did he go there and not just any anonymous planet? Why did he choose that planet?
Are you saying that he tried to go into that little cave thingy and touch things and have mirrors and stuff?
Well, no, he obviously went on a mission. He had a whole bunch of things. He had the necklace that was shown that they've said in the visual dictionary is a Crusader necklace. He had the compass that comes from the game. He had all the books. They weren't necessarily there. Maybe he collected them along the way. I think what happened is he went looking for an answer. He went looking for where do I go wrong and how do I do this right? And I think an important part about the Luke story is that he went on this huge journey that happens between the trilogies and realizes that there is no purpose. There's no point. There's no deeper meaning. And I think that's where we get Luke that's decided to cut himself off. Is that he's gone on this whole personal journey that we've missed in 30 years and realized there's no point.
Oh my God, The Last Jedi is so depressing.
It's about failure.
It is about failure.
Which I believe was Wolanski's point, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Robert Wolanski, yeah. But no, I mean, I think that kind of speaks to the whole thing about how this movie is about failure. Everybody in this movie is experiencing failure in some way, and how do they bounce back from that? How do they recover from that? And, Luke has his own way of recovering from it, which is to project himself and whatever the hell that was. And Kylo's bounce back, I guess, is to just take over the First Order.
And slam Hux around.
Right.
Which everybody wants to do.
But it's all very much about failure, and I think that kind of speaks to Luke and his mission, if you want to call it a failed mission, in discovering that the Jedi, that the whole mythos of the Jedi was just about, what does he say in the movie? Something about vanity or... The hubris. So yeah, he talks about the hubris of the Jedi and how they're so proud and whatnot, and it's all bullshit. So
because they all failed, and they all had to figure out, like Obi-Wan failed, Yoda failed.
When you look
they
back
all
on
failed,
the legacy of the Jedi, it's not very, it's not polished at all.
What he says is right. They literally give rise to the Emperor.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, like, I love overanalyzing when they do go into that little place where you snap and things happen. Because when Luke does it in Empire Strikes Back, he fights Darth Vader, and then the mask cracks open, and he sees himself. And you think after Return of the Jedi, you think like, oh, it was because it's his dad, and his dad is himself. And then now you go, oh, no, it was not about that. He actually did have to kill himself. And so you're like, one, it's not just one writer doing this. Like, that's pretty intense that we got that kind of thing. So now what Rey is doing down there and what she's finding out is really confusing. But I think it'll be kind of cool to see what happens in 9.
Yeah. All right, I think we got one last one right here.
Yes, you may have answered my question, but what do you guys think of Rogue One after watching this film? Is it?
I still love it, and I'll watch it pretty much if I have the opportunity. It's one of those films that I think fits. It wasn't necessary, but none of these Star Wars stories are necessary. It'll just fill in gaps, and I think it exists as the answer to a decades-long joke. Why would you put an exhaust port in it? But I think it's a great heist film in the middle of a war, and it's the first time we actually see, I think, a war in Star Wars, other than that one sequence at the top of Revenge of the Sith. It actually treats it like a war, and I think it's necessary to see the rebellion in that context to be able to have the conflict between Holdo and Poe in Last Jedi. Because you see, this is not just a bunch of people running around blowing stuff up. There are military rules of engagement that they're going to follow. They have generals. They have a pecking order. It's not just, you won a battle. You become a higher rank, Luke Skywalker. You did this thing at Danab. You're going to be a general, that kind of thing. It actually is based on military careers. I think it's necessary in the grand scheme of it to see what the rebellion is or what the resistance winds up becoming.
Rogue One is really why I disliked Last Jedi first, because when I first watched it, because I loved all those characters and I was emotionally attached to all of them, and I'd never seen them before. And in Last Jedi, I had already seen Kylo, I'd already seen Finn, and I didn't care. And that was kind of I'm glad you brought up Rogue One, because that was my biggest beef with Jedi at first, is that, well, I know it can happen, because everybody said, well, that's because you didn't know these characters for your whole life, all the years on this planet. Like, well, no, I just saw Rogue One a year ago, and I liked all those characters that I've never seen before, and I liked all of them. I mean, every single one of them. I felt very attached when they died at the buddy film part of it, when they died at the end, or not towards I can't remember their names right now.
Spoilers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but when when he went off and the blind guy passed and everything, I was very, very sad when that happened, and really everything with the new characters in the most recent two, I'm not caring as much, And
Would you have cared more if Finn had actually gone in and killed himself in the weapon and, been successful or not?
I probably would have found a little bit of like retribution there, and really for what it represented, I would have been.
So it's all about you being right, is what this thing is about.
Yeah, but I would have. I that's what I couldn't understand with some of these characters, is that I want to like them a lot, and I'm just not. I'm not liking them, and I just did with a movie that came out a year ago with all brand new characters, so it can be done. And I know a lot of people share that same. A lot of people love Rogue One. I mean, the heist. I mean, it's great. It's a really, really good film. I personally think it's better than the Force Awakens and Jedi.
Yeah, there's that great moment in Rogue One where you're watching it and you realize, oh yeah, these guys are all going to die, and it's kind of like you forgot, like, yeah, they're not going to make it to the end of this movie, and it really gives weight to that film. I think that film's really powerful.
I also really love Rogue One, more so than Last Jedi, but I will say. I'm able to understand a lot of what I didn't understand the first time I watched The Last Jedi, so I do like the movie more than I did the first watch, because I allowed myself to analyze a lot of it and understand it a lot more and see past, my problems with it. A lot of the main issues I have with it still stand. Like, I still hate the horrible longest chase scene ever. I still don't really enjoy Canto Bight. I don't really like what they're doing with Finn and Rey. I don't want a love triangle between Finn, Rey, and Rose. I hope that does not happen, because JJ has a habit of doing that and giving in to a lot of fans and, ridiculous fan fiction type stories that I don't want. I don't want it.
Then put Poe in there and it's a pentangle.
But, oh God. Can we make that canon?
Is there
I'll
any
take
other?
that.
All right. All right. So, other than Marvel, is there any other film property that exists out there? I hate it. I'm going to go watch it again and see why I hated it. And they'll go see it 3, 4, 5 times. This film has grossed over $1 billion in less than a month for a film that everybody calls divisive.
I've literally talked to people that have said, I hated it. I hated everything about it. And I'd say, how many times did you see it? 3.
I hated it the third time just as much. Yeah. Yeah, it challenges you, and yeah.
But why? Why do you want to like? If you don't, if I don't like a restaurant, I will not go back there. It's not just if they have a line out the front and there's 1,800 other people who want to eat there.
Back to your question about Rogue One. I think that the franchise filmmaking now suffers from an overtelling. I think that they should have stopped making Terminator movies after Terminator 2 because Terminator 2 the Terminator movies are stronger in what we don't see. And I think Rogue One defied that, and by somehow explaining things that were only hinted at and making that story stronger, it's a rare thing. Because how many times have you seen them go to the bottom of the well to make another movie and make a whole movie out of one line that we heard in the original, and that movie stayed better when our brains filled in the mystery. I think I respect Rogue One for that. I respect Rogue One for being a Disney movie that killed off all the characters in the end. I thought
Not
that was
just the parent.
Yeah, I thought that was extremely bold. I love seeing a gritty, boots on the ground, Black Hawk Down, Star Wars movie, and I think that to get into the kind of political thing that we were talking about, I thought that was the first time that we saw the rebels for being rebels and seeing that sometimes the good guys have to do bad things, and the way that Diego Luna's character just shoots that guy because he can't carry them. There's so many things about Rogue One, and I think Rogue One's this perfect representation of a Star Wars film in that it is so authentically Star Wars. I think it is more authentic Star Wars than Force Awakens and Last Jedi are in terms of the visual tones of it and the costumes, the production design, and then it's also this very, layered movie about something that we've lived with for decades, and to reverse engineer that in a quite literal way, and to take a long-running fan joke and make it the plot of a film and make it a really smart, good film.
I always said I thought Rogue One was the greatest Star Wars fan film ever made.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. Also, we got K2SO, so that's yeah.
All right, folks. Well, we're gonna have to wrap it up. We're out of time. Are we out of time? We're out of time.
We made it without talking about Canto Bite. We made it.
A little bit. Let's give a big
James
hand
and
for
I
our
are going to
panel.
fight in the bar.
James, Jazmine, Ashton, Justina, Devin, and Shannon. Thank you so much for coming out today.
Thanks, guys. Stick around and watch Last
Say it.
Jedi now.
Say it.
What?
May the Force be you.
I wasn't done, you idiot.
I said say it. You didn't say it.
My name is Mark Walters with BigFanboy.com, and may the Force be with you.
Yeah.